Hello and welcome to this demonstration of painting a simple two-colour landscape. Now for this painting we're going to use just two colours, and that will be indigo and yellow ochre. Now these are acrylic inks. In many ways they're very similar to watercolour, but they do have some major differences. They're still water-based, so you can still mix them with water. You can also use them with watercolours as well. You do need to give them a good shake if you haven't used them for a while, because the pigment will settle into the bottom of them. One of the big differences between this and watercolour is the fact that they will dry water resistant. So really once they're dry, they're there. They're not going to move like watercolour does, which can be useful in that if you wanted to lay colour over the top, you can certainly do that without disturbing them. Obviously with watercolour you have to be very careful if you're going to put a second wash on. And the colours can be quite punchy compared to some. These aren't too bad. They're not neon or anything crazy like that. So, as I say, always best to give them a shake. Make sure you got the top screwed down properly though, otherwise you're going to end up repainting the living room. Okay, so paper wise, this is a cold press 300 GSM watercolor paper. Again, you could try other papers, but you want something with a fair amount of weight to them, because obviously we're going to be laying water on, and that's what our flat brush is here. It's just a synthetic brush, not very expensive, came in a pack. It says number 12. And regarding using brushes and inks, yeah, you can just wash them out afterwards. I wouldn't let the ink dry on them, and if you've got any particularly precious watercolour brushes, maybe just find an older brush or a brush you're not too care about. I've used inks a lot with my brushes, and there's been no long-term damage to them. So to lay down our landscape, I want to do some hills in the background, and then we're going to have what will be like a river, which is the inspiration come from down in the Cotswolds, where the River Severn runs out into the estuary, out into the sea, into the Bristol Channel. And we're going to have some grass, sand, and then some grassy foreground. So to begin with, I'm just going to put in a line across just below the centre, just using the dipper, or the dropper I should say, just to start putting some colour in. I'm going to put in a fair amount. I'm not going all the way across though, because I want it that the landscape drops down and meets off into the distance. Okay, so make sure we've got a fair bit of ink down. And then I'm going to use some of the yellow ochre. And again, I'm using the dropper. But I'm not going to put this all the way across. I just want to put a few spots in, because obviously the plan is this is going to meet. I'm putting a few drops just underneath. This is going to combine with the indigo and mix on the paper. We're doing our colour mixing on the paper. Now the reason I'm turning the paper is I find it's easier to put the top edge in of the actual landscape. Now I'm just using plain water here. So hopefully you might be able to see where I'm painting in with water, or you may not. I'm not trying to do a round, I'm just trying to put a little bit of a shape into the area. Now I'm going to put water into most of this. There might be the odd little spot where there's no water, but that's fine. That adds interest to the actual landscape. Now I'm just going to touch, and hopefully you'll see how the ink runs and merges, which is considerably faster than refined with watercolour. Now we can tilt to encourage the pigment to move. I don't want to tilt it too much or mix them too much, because I want to keep some of the combination of different colours in there. I'm just washing my brush to come back off, because obviously I've got the colour from where I touched, but in places here I think that may be too big an area. So the choice I've got is I could either touch with the brush to put some water in, or I'm going to take a very little bit of pigment and just drop it in. Okay. Then I'm just going to use the brush just to bring some of that water down, and then just encourage it to come in. If you've got areas that it's not moving as much as you would like, a little tap can do that. Now, you might be able to see quite a bit of water is collected on this side, so I'm just going to tilt the paper, and you'll see it's going to sort of be slowly started to move down. And you see on that top edge how it's coming across. Now, if we want to add some detailing, we could leave it and just let the colours mix like this, which we want that to happen. But if we want to put some detail in, we can actually sort of scratch into the paper. We're not trying to rip through the paper, we're just trying to put a little line into the paper. Now, you can use different things. You can use a craft knife, you can use the edge, let me find one, like the tip of a brush if you've got one shaped like that. What I quite like, because it comes with every paint tube, is the corner, and it's pretty safe. You're not going to hurt yourself with that. And I'm just going to draw in some lines. If you notice, it's pulling some of the pigment out as well, and I might actually in places come outside of where the water edge is, just to put some interest in. Don't go too crazy, but you can experiment, and you'll find that as the pigment dries and as it settles, so much of it will carry out into those lines. So that's our distant hillside for now. So I want to add in another line, but what I'm going to do again is I'm going to use the dipper, make sure it's not too wet, and I'm just going to add in a very thin line, but leaving a gap between the base of the hills. Now, occasionally, if it comes up and kisses and then comes back down, that's fine. And I'm just leaving it like that. Why have I done that? It's to give a little bit of a definition between where the hills are and where I suppose the mid-ground is. And again, with just a little bit of water, let me just grab a little bit of water. I'm just going to just come along. I'm not coming all too far down. I just want to come across just a touch. And again, I'm leaving some gaps. I'm not coming across all the way. And it's just to add a little bit of interest there. And again, a little bit of the yellows mixed into that. That's fine. You know, this is letting as they say, we're letting the colour paint itself. Now, we do have a foreground. Let me just grab a couple of these little spots here I've managed to put on. I'm not too worried about that. That's going to disappear in a moment. I want to put in the sand, or the riverbed, bank, that's the word I'm after, across in the foreground here. So what I'm going to do is, I'll do it on camera, that might be helpful. I'm going to just, again, pick up some of the yellow, and I'm just going to bring it across. I'm going to come across in a diagonal. And again, it's not a straight line, and I'm sort of touching and lifting and moving across like so. And again, make sure I haven't got really any of that blue colour at the moment in my brush. I'm just cleaning this water brush off, and then I'm going to sweep down, but in a diagonal movement in places. But I'm going to leave some gaps like so. I'm just going to wash my brush off. Now, in the foreground, I'd like some grasses, some reeds or whatever. So again, I'm going to use the indigo, and I'm just going to put in just some lines. And I'm just letting the colours mix together. I'm not going to come all the way across. I'm going to sort of hold back. And then I'm going to use the corner of the brush just to flick up, to start bringing in some details. As you can see, there's quite a bit of water on here, and it's pulling up quite a lot of the detail, quite a lot of the pigment up. Now, if we want, we can add in a little bit of the yellow just into there. If you do get any of the other colour in, obviously you can just wipe it off on a cloth, but it's normally not an issue. And again, I'm going to pick up so we start getting some more of the detail coming through for us. Here, I might just do a little bit of a flick again, leave a little bit of a gap. And it's up to you how high or how low you go with the grasses. And I think I would probably leave it at that. These lines are quite like that, a little bit of detail. You can always pull out some more lines by pulling into the pigment as well, if you so wish. But just have some fun. Here on this little bit of foreground, again, if we want to draw in, we can. Now we could leave it just like that and have it as a very abstracty type landscape, or we could let that dry and maybe add in some more colour. So let's leave it to dry and then we'll have a look afterwards. So here we have our landscape that we painted with our acrylic inks, which again was the indigo and the yellow ochre. And it's pretty much all dry here now. I think there's a tiny little spot there that's still a little bit damp, but we're not going to let that stop us. So, as I said before, we can combine watercolour with acrylic inks. So I'm going to use two fairly similar colours. Well, one is the same colour, one is indigo, which is the colour here. And rather than yellow ochre, I'm using this transparent transparent gold deep, which is this colour here. Although it's mainly going to be the indigo that I'm going to use, just to allow us to drop in a little bit of a sky. I'm just feeling, yeah, I wouldn't have done that if I didn't think it was dry, but I was just double checking it was dry. So what we can do is we can wet across. I'm just going to put in a simple sky. What we can do, if we want to do something a little bit different, is we can just, I'm going to use this little bit of scrap paper just to stop the water going everywhere. But I'm just going to just drop in some. Okay. This water's got a little bit of colour in, so hopefully you can see. You don't have to have this at all. I'm just dropping in some water just to give us a bit of a random colour. Now, I've been using flat brushes, but for this, I'm just going to use a round. I could still use a flat, but I've got the round. So I'm just going to pick up some of this indigo, fairly wet, and I'm just going to drop it in. I just want a very loose sky in here. And if we want, we can come down into the hillside, because as I say, it's not going to particularly affect what we have. If we want to put a little bit of movement in, we could always use a water bottle. Let me just move that back up a little bit, that's better. And I'm just going to add just a little spray of water just to get that to mix for me. And again, we can just tilt that. If you've got some shapes that you're not too keen about, such as like there, again, just come in and just tap them. Like so. There we go. Now, I'm just going to soften this edge here just a little bit. There we go. That's better. Okay. I'm just going to move some of that, because obviously the paper is buckling slightly, but that's fine. I'm not too worried about that. Now, this is an area of water, and obviously that's going to very much reflect the colour that it can see above it. So I'm just going to just draw across, which is just sweeping across. I'm not filling it all. I want some gaps. I want some white paper to show, and I'm just going to add in just a little bit of colour into there, just to kind of mirror the clouds there. I might put a little bit more in there just to reflect a little bit what's in the sky. But the difficult thing, as always in this, is to leave it, is to stop to stop playing with it as I continue to play with it now. So I'm just going to leave that like so. Okay. Now, while that's just drying there, we can add in some more detail. If you wanted to stop now, stop now. You don't have to do any more. But if you wanted to add in some more pen work or line work, we can do that. I'm just going to use what is just a gel pen. You could use a fine liner. This is 0.7 made by Zebra, and I've got a Posca pen, which is obviously white, acrylic in here as well, and this is a 0.7. Obviously with the Posca pens, you do need to give those a little bit of a shake to make sure you've got the paint going, and you do at times need to just press down to actually make sure it's actually working. So with the pen, what we can do is, if we wanted, we could add in some more line work into the hillside, like so. Then we could even flick in a few little details into the grasses. But again, totally up to you. And again, with the white Posca pen, we can actually also add in some line work. And again, we could also flick in. Probably shows better on some of the darker colours. Again, I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can do. Oops. What you can do afterwards. Sorry about that. I think we went out of shot a little bit, but yeah, I was just flicking in some bits like that. Again, with the Posca pen, well, it's still a little bit damp. You can always touch it to do that. And again, if we felt we wanted some detail in, maybe a bird or something, we could either do that with some paint or with a pen. The thing with birds, I find, is not to go too crazy. Normally put them on one of the thirds. And again, the way I quite like doing it is to put one little line, leave a gap, and then put another line in. There we go. And I'm just going to put a little smaller bird in below, slightly different angle, and maybe one right off in the distance there. And then don't forget, always sign your work, or in my case initially. And for me, I think that's probably finished. Hopefully that's give you some idea of what can be done with acrylic inks and watercolour. This could be a finished picture, or it could be a sketch for a larger work. You could experiment with the composition, the colours. And remember, this is only two colours, indigo and a yellow. In this case with the inks, yellow ochre. Thanks for watching.